Hey everybody, welcome back to What Happened to You. Thank you to everyone who has joined the Patreon so far, and if you haven't already, head on over to patreon.com/Sebastian Scales to get some bonus content and to help support the podcast. The link is in the description of this video, and I will see you there. Hey Chaz.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking.
Good.
I'm excited to be a part of your podcast. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited to have you on. Yeah, I got tagged in one of your videos, and I was just super moved by the way that you speak about your experiences, and like you're so open and personable, and it's very easy to listen to you speak about what happened to you. And
Well, thank you.
yeah, like I said in the email, there's really no way that this needs to go. It's totally open, and
I
however
love
you'd like
that.
to tell your story, and I'm all for whatever you think feels right. So,
Okay. Well, my
um,
life is an open book, so you can ask any question you want, and I'll give you the most honest answer possible.
fantastic.
I was thinking actually when you said you were going to ask like what happened to me, like I know because that is like, the theme of your show. There's like so many, my whole TikTok channel is about what happened to me, basically.
Yeah,
I tell my life story on there. So, and I'm really glad that it caught your attention. But the first thing I would say that, to introduce myself to your audience and tell them what happened to me is that within the last 10 months, I've gone viral on TikTok by telling my life stories, which are similar. Some of my stories I think you can relate to personally.
totally.
Yeah. And that's how I think I've reached a lot of people is just somehow I've touched a part of them that they can relate to. And I've shown them that it is possible to heal and move on from a lot of these experiences that I've had.
That's great. It's no surprise that you've resonated with so many people on TikTok. I mean, imagine that's been a pretty
Thanks.
wild experience in the last
It
10
has.
months.
It was so unexpected. I had no idea. The first true story that I uploaded was about when I was molested at age 12 by a 40-year-old man. I felt like I wanted to, have some kind of impact on TikTok. Up until that point, for like 6 weeks on TikTok, I had done nothing but lip sync, and I finally like worked up the nerve to tell one of my own personal jokes, and that got a good reception. And I'm like, I wonder what they would think about my stories, like if I really told, some deep, intimate stories. And if it would help even one person, it would be worth any embarrassment that I might risk. And I did not expect it to go viral. That story hit over 600,000 within the first few hours, and I was shocked. So immediately, I made another story about how I got married when I was 15 years old to a 32-year-old woman, and the sexual abuse continued.
Wow. Yeah, it is pretty
Just on
wild
another
to go.
level.
Totally. Yeah, it is a massive shift to go from lip syncing to talking about getting molested online.
It
That is a,
is, yeah.
that is a really big
um,
shift.
the comments though, like that's what validated my decision to do this was the comments that I received, and the people are just so incredibly loving. The vast majority of my followers are actually females, and that's I'd say probably like 88% right now according to my analytics are women, and they have children and husbands and sons, and they understand, that men don't talk about sexual abuse. I don't know how censored we have to be on your
Oh, no
podcast.
restrictions. Yeah, you can
Oh, good.
say anything you want.
Because that's the thing about TikTok. I have to really pussyfoot around what I say on there, and like
Yeah.
a lot of essay and graping and pew pew, and it's
What
just
is pew
ridiculous.
pew?
I guess that's what they say for gun. He pulled out his
Oh,
pew pew,
okay. Yeah.
which totally reduces the whole like a whole school got shot up effect. That they're trying to advocate against. Um,
Yeah. Pew pew. Oops. A bunch of kids got murdered. Crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a whole life of stories that, things that happened to me, but my biggest ones are, being molested. Like
Yeah.
those stories really resonate with my audience for some reason. And but the feedback for the vast majority of the feedback is very positive and loving. And it
That's so
really,
great.
makes me so emotional. Yeah, I never expected so many people to say I love you. People who've never met me in my life, that they watch my story and they can really relate. And I open my messages to the public. A lot of people don't know this, but anybody who messages me, I'm going to look at your message, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to respond. It takes me a long time, as you can imagine, to
Of
keep up.
course.
Sometimes it'll be 3 days before I can even open that message. So I never recommend anybody to like message me anything urgent. Email me if that's the case, but I will
Yeah,
respond. That's my thing. I want to be accessible to people, and I want them to tell me their stories, because for a lot of people, I'm the only person they've ever told their story to.
that's right. It's powerful. Somebody who can you can speak to, who won't judge you and will also know what you mean.
Right. It feels good to be able to do that, to let you know that you're not alone, that if you've experienced the same abuse, if you've been sexually abused as a child, you can overcome that. And it took me many, many decades, really. It wasn't until about 4 years ago that I really snapped out of it. And that in and of itself is controversial, my method that I use, because I use psilocybin.
Oh,
And
awesome.
yeah, and it changed my life. It really
Wow.
did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what
I
well,
never expected it to. I was
so
terrified.
yeah, oh man, I have a bunch of questions about that. So,
I love talking about
yeah, that's great.
it.
So, Chaz, what happened to you?
Well, when I was 12 years old, I was sexually molested by a 40-year-old man. That's the gist of the story, but I'll give you some background on it. I was living in Eminence Village apartments in a small town in Kentucky with my mother and my siblings, and we were on welfare and food stamps, and we were living in poverty, as everyone in that apartment complex was. And my neighbor was a young boy about my age, and we were friends, and his uncle used to come and visit him all the time. And his uncle started watching me from a distance, and I didn't pay that much attention to it because I was just a kid. I was busy playing. I had a low self-esteem. I never imagined that anybody would be looking at me in a sexual manner or attracted to me, so that never crossed my mind. Looking back, it's easy to see, he spent a lot of time in the parking lot staring at me. But he set his sights on me, and he was a child molester. He uh, told his nephew to come invite me over with them on a trip to Kings Island, and which would take us out of state and get us home really late, which meant we would have to stay at his house. And that night, when we got to his house, my brother slept in another room. I had my two brothers with me. They slept in another room, but he chose me to sleep in his room, in his bed with him. And that's when he molested me as I was sleeping. I woke up and I felt him touching me. And I was 12 years old. I was already, I think on the inside, I knew I was bisexual. So I had an attraction towards other guys, other boys, my age. But I was curious, and he promised that he wouldn't hurt me, and he didn't physically penetrate me, but he definitely screwed with my mind. Because when you're that age, and I was obviously not old enough to consent or to even really understand, the magnitude of the experience and how manipulated I was by him. And it took me many years of feeling a lot of guilt that because I went back to his place repeatedly that summer. And the thing is, my mom let me. And that was a hard thing for me for many years to accept as well, was that my mother was pretty much an accomplice in this, because he would send me home with money and she would take half of that money every time. So it was almost like my mom was my first pimp. Yeah. And I say first because like I'm telling stories about a guy named Steve right now who later became my actual pimp. And
Whoa.
yeah, that was an adventurous time, but it sent me on to this experience, sent me into promiscuity. It
Yeah.
it taught me that I was not worth anything more than what somebody would pay for an hour with my body. And I think that's the reason why I was so easy. I mean, it was just, my first trick I turned in Chicago on the street was for like $9. I didn't even know the guy was going to pay me. I was just getting in the car with a stranger, driving into a dark alley. I'm putting myself at
Yeah.
risk. And he's
Well,
like, "Well,
I
this
mean,
is all I
it's
got." And I'm like, "Well, what's that for?" you know, because I was so naive. I just, I would have gone with anybody, who paid me attention or made me feel special, because my mom didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, I was an easy target.
Totally. Our worth gets wrapped up in sex so
Hmm.
quickly, especially when it's happening at such a young age. When did you find out that he was paying your mom?
it was basically as soon as I came home with money, and she took half of it. He arranged with her that he would pay me $5 an hour to work so many hours on painting his barn. And I actually did paint his barn. And I would go back home, and he molested me, so he got double bang for the buck. And my mom took it; she took her half, like any pimp would, except that 50% is like more than than my future pimp would have taken. He only
It's
took
a pretty
20.
good rate.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
50%.
Kids discount. Did she know about the molestation?
She has never admitted it. My mom had passed away in 2019 of Alzheimer's, but before that, we have had conversations about this, and she never admitted it. She never apologized for it. She just tried to change the subject every time I brought it up. And but I know in my heart she must have known. And near the end of this, summer, that with going back and forth to this guy's place, his own sister warned my mom. She's like, look, he got ran out of town for this,
Mm.
and he was promising me a bicycle and a pony. And like, I kept going back, thinking,
Yeah.
I'm going to get a bike just today, the day, and my mom got sick of seeing me get strung along. And finally she said, if I buy you a bicycle, will you stop going over there to his place? And I was like, yeah. Are you kidding? Like, shit, yeah. So she got me a 10 speed, and my other brothers were so jealous of it, like it was like I was getting special treatment. And then I crashed it the first day, but I crashed it into my bully's grandmother's car, which felt good. Left a big
Oh,
old streak
great.
along the side with my tire. Yeah, I was just like, he's never going to know who did that. But he was a bully, and maybe his granny didn't deserve it, but he did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I stopped seeing him, and my mom never apologized, but I swear I know she knows. I know she knew. I became very promiscuous with young boys my own age for a while
Mhm.
before I left town. I mean, and then I met my wife. So, like, I knew by age 15, when I met my wife, that I was already bisexual, because I had plenty of experience with boys and girls, believe it or not. Kentucky
Mhm.
kids are nasty. They
Really?
can be. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm
Wow.
telling you. I was surprised, like, looking back on my childhood, somebody must have been sexually abusing a lot of children in our town, because like they were all very promiscuous, and I was a part of that. So,
Yeah.
but I do believe my promiscuity stemmed from being molested at 12.
I think so too. I mean, it just puts you in this space and you just try to normalize it. You're like, oh, this is
Yeah.
just what happens. And it almost
Yeah.
like it feels like the hypersexuality comes from a sense of wanting to feel some sort of safety and control in this environment that was totally just forced upon you. So you start wanting
I
to
get that.
have sexual experiences with other
Mhm.
kids that makes you feel like, oh, look, this is just what we do, right? This is just part of it. And it's hard to know in those moments that, like, the intricacies of molestation and how it affects your mind are so intense, but we have no idea when we're going through it. We're just trying to find some sense of normalcy in the absurd.
And it's almost impossible, because we're too young to process those kinds of emotions and that kind of information. We're not armed with the information that we need about people in general to really be
Yeah.
able to understand and fully comprehend the magnitude of what happened to us. I don't like accepting gifts. I have people messaging me all the time asking if they can send me a gift, and I just, I feel so awkward. I'm just not a person who accepts gifts, and I think it's because the way that they groomed me, for lack of a better word. Both this man and my 32-year-old wife gave me gifts. They bought me clothing, and, I got my first Sony Walkman, and then, Olivia Newton-John tape. I was like, I'm in heaven, like I felt like somebody
Yes.
special. But there was always the strings attached. There were strings attached to those gifts, and I still can't bring myself to just accept a gift without some awkwardness to it, because I've, in the back of my mind, subconsciously feel like there's something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Somebody
like
wants something in return.
exactly.
Yeah.
We have this associated fear of receiving gifts because we know what that meant for us in the past. And
Yeah.
I mean, I even feel this way with like compliments, like
Yes.
word gifts, like
Hmm.
almost
Yes.
like, dude, sometimes I'll find myself like trying to, as quickly as possible, even the playing field of what was said, almost to like
Me
rid
too.
myself, yeah, of like
I want to
any
copy their comment
obligation.
and paste it right back to them.
Yeah,
And
dude,
just like, yeah,
totally.
like we're even. There you go. We're even.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Oh, I get into this like almost like this response paralysis because I feel like if I don't say enough back, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Or I'll owe you something.
Right. And I bet you get a lot of those. I bet you get a lot of complimentary messages from people as well. I know that I
Totally.
do. And I like, and the comments. And I wish I could keep up with the comments. That's probably the hardest part about being on TikTok is like, it really strips me from the personal connection that I could have with each and every person who feels the way they say they feel about it. Like, don't you just wish
Absolutely.
you had the time and energy to meet and greet every one of those people and show them the love that they show you here
Yes,
or
I
on
do.
TikTok, like
I
on
do.
online in general, probably. Yeah, I get more hate on YouTube
Yeah.
though. I don't know
There's
why. Yeah, I got
I don't
stuck
know
into
why.
in the wrong, YouTube algorithm or something, and I get some hate. But it's excelling. That's making my videos pop, so I'm good with
That's right.
that.
Any comment is good for the algorithm.
Yeah, go ahead. Hate me all you want. Hate me until I'm famous. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
But I don't
So
want to be famous though. Like I would not want to be like Mama Tot famous or like or celebrity famous. Like that's scary to me. That is so scary.
that would be a lot of compliments. That would be a
Yes,
lot
way
of
more than I can ever
gifts.
keep up. Yeah, I don't know if I could like handle that.
Well, it's so interesting that you feel, I mean, I really know like exactly what you mean when you say the discomfort around receiving. And I was working on this in therapy a couple of months ago. Basically, there is an existence available for us outside of these like it's possible for us to receive without guilt and fear and worry. And I think that sometimes the fact that we feel that way is literally just the roadmap that we need to follow to go into those feelings of discomfort and basically continue retraining our brain to know and see that it is no longer the reality. We're not going to get molested again if we receive these gifts. And also, like, people aren't giving us these things or saying these things oftentimes to get anything back. It's
Right.
just our own
They're not.
personal.
That's the thing. I feel so guilty when I say no, but like I always say no. And I feel guilty about that. And I hear you. That I am worthy, and like I shouldn't feel like that I'm obligated in any way, to anybody just because they choose to give me a gift. Just accept it out of the loving kindness of their hearts. And I've had people tell me that.
Definitely, yeah. So your mom eventually got you the bike, and then she
Yeah,
said, "All right, you're not going over there." How did it feel once you realized that you weren't going to go over it there anymore?
it felt good. It felt like the an obligation was lifted off of my shoulders. And but at the same time, like, because in the beginning it felt like, oh, this is a great guy, I'll come back because he makes me feel special.
Hmm.
And because like he doesn't hurt me, he just like he just went down on me. That's all he did. And it was like, I mean, who doesn't like that when you're 12 years old? You get hard when the wind blows. So, it wasn't that, and that was
That's
the thing. But
right.
people, when I mentioned that on TikTok, so people are like, "You were abused, you were raped, you need to acknowledge this." And I'm like, "I just fucking told you what he did to me." Like,
Hmm.
I mean, like how much more graphic do I have to get? And I think other people, yeah, it would have been a hell of a lot more traumatizing if I had been forced into a position of being penetrated. But his psychological control over me was definitely a fearful one. I thought he could hurt me. He was a grown man. He was strong. He was bigger and stronger than me. And
Yeah.
I was scared of the teenage, football players. So of course I was going to be scared of this man. If I told anybody, if I did anything, he told me, he let me know straight up that he would come after me, that I would be sorry. And I
Yeah.
listened to that threat. But he chose me because of my sexuality. Like he knew I had a secret and he knew I would keep his,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, it's very complicated, the good feelings associated with being abused. Because I felt the same way. Like I would get
Did
boners when I
you?
was getting
Yeah,
molested.
see, people and people don't talk about that. Like it's not okay to talk about it, I guess. I've had like people want to be offended for me when somebody asks, so, did you enjoy it? And
Yeah.
sometimes people do. And, it's okay to ask, did I enjoy it? But don't blame me for enjoying it. Like,
Yeah.
the certain
Well,
aspects of it. Yeah, because
it's
like
like what you
I
said
was a
about the
child.
wind. It's
Right.
it's
Yeah.
you,
It's like teenage
anything will give you
hormones.
a boner at that age, and
Yeah.
it's like
Oh, yeah.
it's interesting too how sometimes I don't know if you felt this way, but I almost started getting guilt wrapped up in positive sexual experiences. Like even the feeling good was associated with the molestation, and
Hmm.
I feel like you can go the hypersexual route and also like the non-sexual route where it's like I don't
Hmm.
whether this feels good or bad, I feel like guilty. And maybe that potentially morphs into some of the receiving guilt that we now feel, where it's like, oh, you're giving me all of this love, and I'm not doing anything in return from a transaction point of view, monetarily or
Right.
whatever it is. And so
Like
you
I
feel
can't return it.
guilty. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's where I think it comes down to like, they're telling you this and wanting to give you these things because of who you are, because of what you're doing, and you're already doing enough by being. That's
Hmm.
there's more worth in that than anything that you could say back to them, you know? So I think that
Yeah.
that's where some of the relief comes in is it's like that, you're already enough.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think like feeling that you are enough. It caused body dysmorphia in me, an eating disorder. I was like super, super skinny. There was a couple of times in my life when I weighed 150 pounds. I was skin and bones, and I'm tall. I'm 6'2", so 150 for me is literally skin and bones.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a stress of like constantly feeling like I had to look better. I had to, um, I just never felt and like enough, like good looking enough to even attract people. And whenever I did get in relationships, I inevitably would sabotage those relationships, because I didn't deserve love. I
Yeah,
was only worthy of what I could do in bed for somebody.
that's
And
it.
so I had a really, a few bad relationships that just, didn't work out. But it wasn't because I lacked love. It's just, I loved them very much. I think I just didn't love myself enough,
Yes.
to feel
Yes.
worthy of their love.
Ah, well
Yeah.
said. That's exactly what it is. And when you can you talk about when you met your wife?
Yes. That was in 1983. Um, I was 15 years old, and I had just turned 15. And she and I met in the parking lot of the Eminence Village, the same place where I was living. This was a couple years later, obviously, and I was going to be entering high school soon. And I met a 32-year-old woman in the parking lot of our apartment complex. She lived 2 apartments away from us. And I asked her if I could help her with her groceries, just trying to be neighborly, just trying to be nice. And I'll admit, I found her very attractive. I thought she was very pretty. She had really beautiful clothing. The way she dressed was very stylish. And so I was definitely attracted to her. And I realized very quickly that she was attracted to me when she invited me over to her apartment to watch HBO that same night. And because we didn't have HBO, we were poor. So she had a subscription. I'm like, I want to see HBO. So
Hmm.
that's how she lured me in, so to speak. And because I was attracted to her, like I felt this guilt for years, that like I was responsible for all of this. But, looking back, it's easy to see that at age 15, I wasn't able to consent to a sexual relationship with a 32-year-old woman. But that did not stop her. She opened the door that night and she greeted me with strawberry daiquiris and a jar of peanuts. And we ended up having sex on the floor downstairs in front of the TV while her children were upstairs sleeping. She had 2 girls who were ages 6 and 8 years old.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, this went on for a couple of months where I kept, going back over there and we kept, like boning. Like we had so much sex. She just couldn't get enough. Like she was just really into sex.
Hmm.
I never realized how exhausting that could be, or how exhausted I would be at such a young age. But she took advantage of that energy that I had as a teen, and I felt like a big guy, like none of my friends are getting it, like I'm like, look at me, I'm, I'm an adult now.
Yeah.
And then when my mom became very much more abusive with me than ever, at some point, because she didn't like my wife, or my fiance, she didn't like her buying me clothes. This 32-year-old woman would buy me clothing and things that my mom couldn't, and I think that made my mom jealous, and it definitely upset my brothers because they didn't have it. And so there was a lot of
Mhm.
bickering, and my mom blamed me. And then ultimately, one day, my mom just got on top of me and started choking me. And she stuck her thumbs into my neck, and like I couldn't breathe. And I thought she was going to strangle me to death. She always used to say, like, I brought you into this world and I can take you out of it.
Mm.
And I reached up and I fought back. That was the first time that I ever, like, really applied any kind of force to my mother, but it wasn't as much as I could have. I used some restraint. I just stuck my thumbs into her wrists and I dug them in as deep as I could, to get her to let go. And I'm going to marry this woman. If that's the only way I can get out of here, I'm going to do it. And my mom's like, that's fine by me, because I don't want you here anyway. So she signed the papers, and the judge married my 32-year-old wife and me legally. And for that lasted about a year. I lived with her for about a year. The children called me daddy. My
Wow.
stepdaughters called me daddy, and I was only 15. Looking back, it's really surreal. Um, I have two children today, and it wasn't until my kids got into their teens that I saw the innocence in their eyes, and I realized that was me. I
Hmm.
was a child. I was just a child. Like, yeah, I was 6 feet tall and I was wearing skin tight jeans, and, like, and I was promiscuous. But I was a child, and I feel like, my ex-wife should have known better. And she did. She was a child molester, and it took me, and it's still even hard for me to say it, that my wife was a child molester. But what the hell else do you call a 32-year-old woman who's molesting a 12 or a 15-year-old boy?
That's what it is.
Yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
I mean, and outside of marriage, she could be convicted for a sex crime. So, but that's the problem. And so now, one of the things I use my platform on TikTok for is to advocate against child marriage, because it's now still legal. I believe the last I checked, it was 42 states in the United States that allows people under the age of 18 to get married.
Whoa.
Yeah. And in some of those states, there's no age limit. Like, even back in 2006, an 11-year-old boy married a 28-year-old woman, like, in
That's so
Tennessee.
wild.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, abuse is everywhere.
It is totally. What like what was that dynamic like?
The children loved me and I loved them, because I had a little sister at the time who was also 6 years old, and she was friends with my stepdaughters, and so I grew to love them about the same as I did my little sister. I never could see myself as their father or their parent, because I still needed a father or a parent myself, but I did accept them calling me dad, and they did. And we would go shopping as a family. We did, we'd take trips as a family. We went to Florida together one time, big road trip, all of this. And I made memories with them. And to this day, I still love those children very much. But one of them has passed away, and the other doesn't speak to me at all.
Hmm.
And that's okay. Like, I don't want to force myself into her life. Like, that was a difficult time. And my ex-wife has since passed away also. And so everything that I say about her, like, she's not here to defend herself in any way. But I'm not telling anything that isn't truth, that can't be verified by public record.
Hmm.
We have the marriage certificate and everything on file still. I had to find it when I married my husband back in 2013. Yeah, they were like,
Yeah.
"You've been married before?" I'm like, "Yep." Yeah,
Wow.
but the dynamic was interesting with my wife, though, because she treated me in many ways like an adult, but then at the same time, she also would treat me like a child. She would leave me at home on the weekends to babysit her daughters while she went out to the club with her sisters. And she cheated on me quite a bit. And I found evidence of this cheating. There was this one guy, the water man, in the town. This guy that drove the water truck, and he came over and like he gave her a present, and I found it in our house. Sorry. It was like a music box, with hearts and Valentines and crap. And I was just like, what the fuck is this? And she's like, this is from Frank, the water guy. I'm like, well, when the hell did you see Frank? So I knew she was
Yeah,
cheating on
what kind
me.
of water are we getting here, dude? This is
Right.
something's
But
up.
she watched me like a hawk. Like I was not allowed to go anywhere. She did not want me cheating on her. I had female friends that I could no longer talk to at all. She was jealous of each and every female friend that I had. But she didn't know about me being molested at 12. She didn't know about my bisexuality. And at the first chance that I got, this 21-year-old guy, just pulled up on the side of the street one day and asked me if I wanted to ride, and I did. And the next thing you know, I'm like cheating on my wife with
Wow.
a guy. And that's when I realized, like that when that happened, that I was not happy with her. That our relationship was not what I wanted. She was very aggressive sexually. She would have sex with me 5 times a day, and I was literally exhausted and sore. And she didn't care. Like I was just like a toy to her, honestly.
Mhm.
At least that's how it felt. Um, and she could be verbally abusive. If she even caught me looking at another woman, just admiring her hair or her clothes or anything, she would hit me. She'd like, not. There was a couple times when she slapped me in the face, but I was never violent with her. I would never lay a hand on her or those kids. I'm just not a violent person at all.
Mhm.
I grew up in violence. My parents used to beat the shit out of each other when I was little, beat each other bloody. Like it was bad. And
Wow.
so,
So,
yeah,
yeah, what was your dad at what point was he no longer involved in your life?
that's a good question. But by the time I was 5 years old, my parents had such a turbulent relationship with each other that my dad ended up moving out. But he had pulled a gun on my mother. I was asleep, and this was like, I'm like 5 years old. I wake up in the middle of the night. There's sparks flying, and my mom is like holding a gun on my dad, and her hands are bleeding, and my dad's forehead is bleeding. And I was like so traumatized, to wake up to this. And my brothers and sisters were all screaming. And I'm just like, my God, what's going on here? My mom's claims that my father tried to shoot her while she was sleeping, that she woke up, she grabbed the barrel of the shotgun and just like smashed him in the forehead with it. And then she told him to get out, and he wouldn't get out. So she cocked the gun, and he got up and he started to go because he realized my mom was serious. And so, but it wasn't like I didn't ever see my dad again, because I did. He was just gone, and like, and I loved him. And even though he was abusive, even as my early childhood, my dad would hit me with his belt. He weighed 300 pounds. That belt would wrap around my body and just leave red marks, and I would have to wear long sleeves even if the weather was warm, just so people wouldn't see the bruises and the markings from his abuse on me and
Mhm.
all my siblings. But I did have a relationship with him, but he wasn't there when I got married. He uh, was living on his own. He never lived with another woman after my mom. And he managed a motel one time in Shelbyville, about 15 minutes from where we lived, and I would go visit him there sometimes. He always let me smoke. He let me drink. We'd have like beer together and everything. He was always real laid back like that.
Mhm.
And he introduced me to a bunch of my cousins once, and they were all a bunch of potheads, and that was awesome. So that was really fun. But
Wow.
yeah, that's the extent of my relationship with my father. I never really bonded with him. I wish I could have, but I heard a lot of really bad things about him. And
Mhm.
now as an adult, I really question everything that I heard, because it was coming
Yeah,
from a bitter mother, who
totally.
had her own psychological issues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like, with both of these molestation experiences, part of it was trying to get out of the space that you were in. And,
Yeah.
it's all sort of like relative. It's like, okay, yes, I'm being molested, but at least I'm not, in gunfire range, or, I'm not
Right.
around my
Yeah.
parents fighting, there's,
Yeah. Or my mom would slap me too. Like,
mm,
she had no problem just, punching me in the back of the head, or, kicking me or slapping me or even throwing something at me. She was always physically abusive, mentally abusive. And so, yeah, I wanted to get out of the house. I wanted to escape, whenever possible. And, sometimes that came with the price.
yeah. So after so you guys got divorced. Um,
Yeah.
was there like a prenup? Can you get a prenup as a kid, like a 15-year-old?
Nope. I tried to leave her once, on my own, and I took a bunch of pills, and I thought I would just end it all, and I took a bunch of her pills from the medicine cabinet. I guess later it turned out to be Valium and some kind of antibiotic that clears up your skin. I don't know, but it messed me up. And the police found me like 2 miles away from home, but walking by a graveyard, and they brought me back to her. And I just cried. I remember thinking, I'm never going to get out of here.
Wow.
And then I ended up going into a halfway house after that, just to try to escape from her. Nothing seemed to work out. There was no prenup, but she definitely owned me. It was like, as a minor, when you are married to an adult, you have no rights. You can't even sign divorce papers. And when I
Mm,
did finally leave her and I ran off to Chicago and I was looking for a job, I was an emancipated adult, but I was still 16. And so the labor laws applied to minors. And that meant that I couldn't work more than 20 hours a week. So I wasn't able to really get, good work experience. I lied about my age and I got hired at a Sizzler steakhouse, and I did that for about a year before they caught on.
So you're in Chicago living on your own.
So at 16, I ran away to Chicago. A friend of mine in Kentucky, who I knew was gay, another boy that I knew was gay that I had like messed around with, and he told me that he had a gay brother in Chicago. And I got in touch with his gay brother in Chicago, who was a 28-year-old gay man living on Roscoe Street, I believe, in Broadway, in Chicago. And he invited me to come and stay with him in order to get out of this mess I was in
Mm,
Franklin Park. And the very first day that I went to go to Scott's house, his name was Scott. He later died of AIDS, but he was a wonderful, kind, loving person who took me in when I needed it the most. And he introduced me that day, it was Easter Sunday, to a man who would later become my sugar daddy for the next year and a half. So I had living arrangements. I managed to settle in with the guy. Oops, sorry. I settled in with a guy named, well, I don't want to say his name, but I settled in with a guy that I will call my sugar daddy.
mhm.
And he was nice. He was kind. I kept working at Sizzler, and I gave him all my money. But then eventually he told me that I didn't have to work at Sizzler, and that, because he had the means to help take care of me, he wanted me to go back to high school. He felt that my education was important. And I actually called him dad, for years, this man. But I call him sugar daddy though today, because looking back, that's what he was. It was a sexual relationship. He was
Yeah.
40, I was 16. A lot of people ask me, well, what's the difference between that? I think the difference is that I still, I feel like I grew up so fast that by age 16, I stopped feeling guilt. And so, like, I never felt any guilt of being molested by a 40-year-old man at age 16, because it had already been done to me so much at age 15 and at age 13, or,
Right.
12 or 13, that, like, I no longer felt any guilt. I was numb to being sexually molested. Like, it just, like, you couldn't molest me. I would just go, to wherever the wind blew, whoever, I should, like I said, if anybody showed me love and attention and affection, you know, um, I was an easy target because
Yeah,
I was
of
so desperate
course.
for that attention still. So, but living with this older man at age 16, did open up some doors for me, and it gave me some opportunities. I auditioned for the Academy of Performing and Visual Arts High School in Chicago at age 16, and I was accepted into the school as a voice major, a singer. And I made so many wonderful friends, and I got bullied a little too, but the overall experience was amazing. But then one of my friends took his own life that year, And the depression that it sent me into was so deep that I stopped caring, and I started drinking a lot of vodka, and I stopped going to school, and I ended up dropping out of the academy. But I am still friends today with a lot of my fellow schoolmates from the academy, where they remember me very well from my freshman year. But I ended up graduating from high school years later at age 21. And it was an external high school program, but I got an actual high school diploma, and that meant a lot to me. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
When did you meet your husband?
I met my husband in 1992. This Lucky Horseshoe Lounge, a bar in Chicago. And it was at Lucky Horseshoe Lounge that I met my husband. He offered me a drink, and I said no. And then he started talking to me, and his accent was so cute. He's from Poland, and he still has the Polish accent, very strong. And I was like, you know what, I will have a drink. And so I ended up having a drink with him, and he said, well, I'm going to go to this bar called Sidetracks. And I'm like, well, I'm going over to the Manhole. I know what dirty names for bars, right?
Yeah.
Sidetracks and Manhole. So I left the bar, and I went to Sidetracks looking for him, and he wasn't there. I thought, did he lie? Like, where is he? Like, he's supposed to be here. So I went ahead and went over to Manhole. Well, when I got to Manhole, he was there looking for me. So we were both looking for each other. We were going to make this connection one way or another. And we danced the night away, and we ended up having breakfast at a little place called Nikki's. And he starts telling me, like, I'd really like you to come over to my condo. And I'm like, oh, a condo, huh? And he's like, yeah, it has an Olympic-sized swimming pool inside. I'm like, are you trying to impress me? And he's like, he got all of his face turned red. And I'm like, because it's working.
Yeah.
And then, like, I finally found out he lived on Lakeshore Drive in a building that I just loved. I had actually been to his building a couple of times with a couple of different clients from my more promiscuous times. So, like, my dream was to live in that building. Of all the places in Chicago, like, that was my Cinderella story. And so I went back with him, and within 24 hours, he asked me to move in with him. And I'm like,
Whoa.
are you kidding? And I've been with him ever since. It's been 30, we're on our 31st year together right now.
Wow.
And we got legally married in 2013. And our son Patrick was with us. Our son Anthony was in the Army at that time, so he wasn't able to be there at our wedding. And I've always felt bad about that.
Mm.
But yeah, we have had a wonderful life. Really, he's a wonderful person, a hardworking man. He worked at a pharmaceutical company. He was there for about 26 years before he retired. And he would get up so early every morning and go to work and take care of us. And I always just had crappy jobs. I must have had like 30 jobs since I met
Mm.
him. But then I got a job working at a gas station a few years ago, like just to get out of the house. I
Mhm.
said, spent 10 years in depression because my little brother died in
Mm.
2000, my little gay brother, and I never figured out exactly what happened to my brother. And the depths of my sorrow and grief were so intense that I went into seclusion for 10 years. I quit working entirely. Merrick just financially took care of me for a whole decade and never complained once. And my husband has always been so kind and generous and loving with me
Mm.
and so supportive. But I was slowly killing myself with an eating disorder. I didn't feel worthy of life. I didn't feel worthy of love. I didn't feel worthy of food. And I had gotten down to 150 pounds again about 5 years ago. And that's when I took psilocybin. And that's when everything changed. I now weigh almost 190 pounds. Yeah. And in fact, I could probably lose a few pounds now.
Yeah.
But I'm healthier. I'm much more, like, mentally strong than I've ever been in my life. And
That's
part of it
amazing.
was getting a job. Like, I got a job. I got out of the house. I was around people again. I became a part of a community. And it was just a gas station, but I loved the customers, and they loved me, and like they all knew me by name. And it wasn't a lot of money, and I eventually like cut my hours down to like 1 or 2 days a week, just because it became like too much sometimes, because management, I just can't stand management,
Mm.
or corporations. It was a corporate gas station. In fact, I quit working at that gas station, and that was like a 1.6 million view video for me. on
Nice.
TikTok. I was like, and then the Happiness picked it up, or some no, some other site on Facebook picked it up, and they got a whole shit ton of views on that. Because
What?
when I quit. I was like, that's it,
Yeah.
I'm done. Thanks for the ride, but it ends here. Yeah.
What a wild journey. What was that trip like? How did you end up doing psilocybin, and what was that experience like?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, because I never get to talk about this on TikTok. That's so censored. Like you say the
Yeah.
word mushroom and trip in, together in the same sentence, and it's going to be blocked. That's what they did to me.
Yeah.
But I was, just started exploring healing. Like, what can I do to heal? And I started somehow stumbled upon these videos on YouTube with people talking about their trip experiences, and it felt like amazing just listening to them. And I found myself like listening to so many trip reports every day for 2 years, just trying to work up the nerve that if I ever was able to find mushrooms and be able to try them, and was determined after listening to Terrence McKenna and the hero's dose and everything, that was the route I wanted to go.
Hmm.
I wasn't even thinking about microdosing, and I still don't microdose. Like, if I'm gonna do a trip, I'm gonna immerse myself entirely. So
Yeah.
I came across an opportunity to get my hands on about 6 grams of golden teacher mushrooms, and I worked up the nerve to try them. And but I did it my own way. I ground them up. I mixed them with Metamucil, believe it or not. Which at my age, Metamucil is a very handy thing to have. Like,
What is that?
um, it is like a fiber substitute, and it's
Oh,
like a powder
nice.
form side. So like so that you can put those mushrooms out real good later when you're done.
Yeah, that's helpful.
It is. I think it helps the digestive process, and it's soothing for the stomach. And so I would mix the dried mushrooms. I like crushed them up, and like a whole 5 grams, and I mixed them in with the Metamucil, and then I mixed in the water, and I had to hold my nose because they smell horrible.
Oh
And
yeah.
as long as I hold my nose when I'm drinking that concoction, it's like I don't even know that they're in there. Um, and that's how I overcame the flavor issue, because I'm real sensitive to taste. But
Me too.
um, are you? Yeah. So yeah,
Oh
I'm like, I
yeah.
can puke real fast if something doesn't taste good. So I'm
I
like, I don't
know.
want these things coming up. I paid too much. So yeah, I took them, and the first time, well, actually I did 1.5 grams the first time. Like, it was just a light dose, a handshake recommended, by McKenna. Just do a little handshake, And I'm like, okay, this was amazing. Like, I had some incredible visuals and stuff. So that's when I decided to go ahead and do the whole 5 grams after that. But that 5 gram just changed my life. Like, it took me to a realm where I experienced an encounter with an entity which convinced me 100% that it is the creator, that it is what we call God.
Wow.
And in my mind, I still believe this to be true, because nothing in that realm of truth, love, and light that I had communicated to me could be contradicted by anybody on earth. Like, this entity said a few things. One, I have no name. I cannot be defined by human beings. And it said it has no gender. And why would it need one? To have any anatomy. So it has no gender. And it said that it loves me like a son, as if I were its child, and it flashed images of my children in my mind, and I could feel the love that I have for my children. I can get emotional just thinking about this, because um, I felt that love. I felt that love that I feel for my children,
Mm.
for myself. And I realized that I never had that. Like, my mom never loved me that way. And neither did my dad. And no one in my family did. And even my own husband couldn't love me the way that a parent loves their child. And it just was so healing for me to feel loved by the creator. And that's the only way I can explain it in words is, I I left this experience. It felt like I was there for months. At some point, I'm like, I'm bored. I think I need to go now.
It's a
And I was
lot of
like, but I,
love.
yeah, I'm like, but how do I remember this? Like, I don't want to forget this experience. I want to always know, that you're with me, and that, that I'm not alone in this world, and that there is something greater after this life. Like, how am I supposed to know this? And it was like the whole thing just got burned into my memory. And like now, every time I close my eyes, I can summon that feeling and I can experience that love of the
Wow.
universe, which is an unidentifiable entity, or just the universe itself, like, indefinable. But the overwhelming sense of calmness and peace that I received from that was so healing. And after that, I feel like I've just been invincible. Like, I just, like, nothing can hurt me. This whole TikTok success that I've been experiencing right now completely came from this experience, because I'm not the
Mhm.
same person today. The guy that people on TikTok are showing so much love to is not the same guy that I was 5 years ago. I was wrapped up in politics. I was angry. I was bitter. I did not love myself, and it showed. And I think I was still coloring my hair brown to try to be like, look younger.
Mhm.
The thought of growing a beard never crossed my mind, until, the pandemic hit. And of course, I had to wear a mask, and I was like, what the hell? Let's give it a try. And so
Yeah.
now it's all the part of my image, it's changed everything about me, and for the better. So, yeah, I
Oh my.
advocate for psilocybin. I really do.
Me too. I mean, that is an incredible story. Wow. And to be able to feel that universal love like like a child of the universe, and to feel all of that without having to do anything in return, without having to, this isn't an
Yeah.
exchange, you know?
Exactly. There was like nothing I could do. And that was nothing was asked of me. It's not, this being never said, go ye unto all the world to preach my gospel or anything like that. I have a feeling like I could never mention the story again, and, would not be, that's would be fine, because it's not my purpose. I'm not here to, like, try to, convert anybody to my beliefs or anything. I didn't even have any beliefs before this. Like, I had abandoned all belief before this
Mm.
happened, and all expectation. And so now that I try to continue my life that way, like, I'm content in the mystery of and all the mysteries of the universe, like, but I also, like you said, I don't owe this entity. It didn't make me feel like I owed the universe anything. It made me feel like I'm a part of this universe, that I belong here. For the first time, I felt like it was okay to just be me. All my shitty feelings, all my happy feelings, like, all my upset, my PTSD and my anxiety, and, all that is just all a part of who I am, past and present, but especially the present. Like, I don't know about you, but like the present is where it's at. Like, and when I focus on the present, it relieves my PTSD, because I'm not allowing myself to relive those traumas from the past.
The present is
Yeah.
all there ever is. We've
Yeah.
never existed
Nothing else
outside of it.
exists.
That's it.
Exactly. Yeah. But I was so wrapped up before this, and worrying about the future, what's going to happen, and then thinking about the past, like, my husband is 71 years old now. I'm 54. He's older than me. And I've always, liked older men, honestly, and I don't know if that's, such a good thing, but because he was never manipulative. He was always like so kind and so different. So the opposite of all the others, even though it took me years to be able to trust him after, the abuse I'd experienced with older men before. But he has just supported me 100% through all of this. And he didn't mind me, trying mushrooms for the first time at age 51 or what, he was like, that's okay. I mean, I've had some harebrained schemes, and he goes along with it every time.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just really lucky, because I see myself as so blessed in this present moment. I don't worry about a future in which I'm going to lose him because he's older than me. I stay in this moment where he's here and he loves me, and we were happy, and this is where I want to be. And so I don't allow myself to entertain thoughts of the future. I used to. I remember telling my doctor, I'm so depressed. And the doctor's like, why? And I'm like, well, because my husband's going to die someday and I'm going to be all alone.
Yeah.
and now I realize, like, I've got children, I've got grandchildren, I have so much support, and and who the hell wants to live forever? Not me,
Yeah.
not him,
Yeah.
not anybody, not on this earth anyway.
It is trippy to think about, the fear of losing loved ones. We can often lose the time that we have with them worrying about the time when they're going to be gone. It's like
Right.
this is the moment that you're with them, and the
Yeah, and here
way
you are
to,
thinking about, yeah, future without them. Like, yeah, like we
yeah,
should be focusing on all the love we have. Then I have to remind myself that all the time about my dogs, because I've got three dogs, and, like, I love them so much, and then a couple of them are 10 years old, and, like, they're not going to be here forever. But if I think about that, then I'm not going to give them the love that they need right now in
that's
this very
right.
moment. Yeah.
And that
So
extends to, basically anything that you are worrying about in the future, or things that have affected you in the past. Like, it all
yeah.
dissolves in the present. You begin to actually experience reality instead of the anticipatory experience, which, of course, you go through trauma and it's like we're basically living in fight or flight, and we're trying to avoid these scenarios happening again, which makes total
Yeah.
sense. But then you go deeper into the moment and you get to actually experience what's happening instead of what are the experiences that have conditioned us to operate in certain ways, fear-based, worry-based orientations. That
Right.
then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm just here, and like nothing can affect me other than what in the past or future, other than my thoughts about them. And it's just like, holy cow, we're so safe.
Yeah. Like life is a series of reactions, and when you learn how to control your reactions, I think that it staves off the future PTSD. Like, if
Totally.
if your dog dies right now, how are you going to respond to that? Like, are you going to freak out? Like, when I found out my brother passed away, excuse me, I was so distraught. I was so sad. I hit the floor crying, just like in horrible grief. And whenever I think about my brother's death, that's usually the first thought that comes to my mind, is how I hit the floor crying. So my reaction to his death was something that, I didn't have any control over back then. But I think today I'm focused on the present moment, and now I think it gives me more strength for whatever's going to come next.
Mm-hmm.
And so, instead of worrying about what comes next, I just focus on the moment that I'm in right now and take care of what I need to at this time. And that's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and an unexamined life is not worth living, and all those other
Yeah.
cliches. I think we
Yeah.
have to, know where we came from, understand where we are, and stay in the present, without projecting any negativity into the future. But I find you incredibly intelligent. You are so far advanced compared to what I was like 20 years ago. I just came into all this realization myself within the last few years. I was still beating myself up over being molested. I felt like it was my fault. I felt like I was a bad person, that I, was just promiscuous and guilty. And even seeing my children, and understanding, it wasn't until, like, after I did the shrooms, like, I woke up one morning and it just hit me. I was like, my mother fucking knew. She knew
Mm.
I was molested, and she let this happen. Like, how could she not know? All the signs were there. Who sends their kids over to some, random 40-year-old man's place for the night or the weekend? Who does that? What kind of, and it was like, I was mad at her. I found myself mad at her. And, and I was like, I can't be mad at her. Like, I forgave her. I told her that I forgave her when she was alive, and I thought I had forgiven her. But there was still this part of me that came to the realization that there was something else I needed to forgive her for.
Mm.
And that made me even more angry at myself. But then, I realized that, close my eyes, put myself back in that place, that dimension where I felt love from the universe, And it brought me the peace of mind to recognize that, my mother will never be able to hurt me again. Like you were saying before, like, if somebody gives you a gift, they can't molest you. I'm not
Yeah.
molestable. I'm no longer
Yeah.
molestable.
Yeah.
Look at us. Can't molest me if you
Yeah.
try. Can't touch this. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so powerful because that space is available to you always. There's never
Yeah.
a moment where you're outside the realm of like unconditional love that is
Yeah.
only we only leave it because of our thoughts. We get
Right.
lost. But we can always
Yes.
come back. And it's such a trippy, and thank you
Yes.
for what you said. I truly, and I'm in awe of you, and I'm so
Oh, wow.
grateful that we're
No, I meant every
having
word.
this conversation.
You are
And
awesome.
thank you, man. The it's like the waviness of worthiness. It's such a wave. It's very trippy, and you can slip out with
Yeah.
thoughts, and there's so much momentum behind our thoughts and the reasons why, we've been thinking these ways for so long that
Mhm.
it's understandable to, despite, slipping into experiences of total love and connection with the universe, to slip
Yeah.
out. And I think it's important to, in those spaces where we realize that, oh my God, I'm feeling so angry, or I'm feeling upset, or all these things that, that is, you're aware now, and you can always come back. And
Exactly.
how lucky we are to recognize that this isn't the way that it has to be. And sometimes we
Yeah.
need to go back to those spaces and feel those emotions in order to get to higher levels, to feel lighter in this existence.
Right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, those emotions only come up when we're actually ready and able to process them. So, you had that realization about your mom after the shrooms, and then it's like, oh, well, now you're in
Yeah.
this space where you can really allow yourself to feel what it's like to know that she knew. And maybe
Yes.
before that you weren't ready yet. And now you are, and you're able to do that and forgive her. And that's like the
Yeah.
ultimate release of trauma, is letting go of any negative emotions that you've accumulated as a result of the experiences. And all of
Yes.
that release allows you to go deeper into this moment and to just experience it fully. And it's
It
just,
does. It's so healing and so peaceful. When you bring yourself to the present and then remember that this person can't hurt you again, and remember that that you have the capacity to love them as the universe has shown me love. I can show her love, and I can show her forgiveness. Because part of the reason I felt so unworthy was because I couldn't forgive myself, not just for the things that I thought were my fault but weren't, but for the subsequent things that I did to myself, and others, cheating on boyfriends, or like turning tricks on the street, and doing too many drugs, doing any drugs, besides weed. Like, I really, I did cocaine for about 6 months. I was addicted, before I met my husband, and that was hard. I was abusing myself. I was abusing my body with alcohol. I used to be a major alcoholic, but now I've got my medical card for legal marijuana. I grow
mhm,
my own. I don't even have to go to
nice.
the dispensary anymore. And it is so healing for me to have that. And I never have to have another drink again. Like,
Yeah.
I actually am okay. The cure for alcoholism in my case was marijuana. And
Yeah.
I would definitely
And
take that.
and probably the
The
healing of the
mushrooms.
emotions that cause you to want to reach for something that is numbing. You start to
Right.
release the emotional charge that leads us
Mhm.
to these other vices that, all of a sudden, like I've been noticing this recently too, where it's like I have been, I haven't been drinking like at all in the last year. And I think it's not so much that I was like, I need to stop this, so much as like I don't feel the urge to do this. And I think that that
Uh,
just comes from the release of the emotions that are causing the urge. And it's
yes.
it's like all of a sudden you're like, oh man, this existence is sick, sober, like or high, whatever. There's like no knocking on anything, whatever works for you.
If you get into a new comfort zone,
Yeah.
and you feel like, you no longer need that crutch, and perhaps one day I'll no longer need marijuana, like, I can't imagine it, but because I love
Well,
it so much.
it's
um,
also
but but
based on like the, oh, go ahead.
well, I just think it's a personal, thing. I
Yeah.
think, each person knows yourself, and you know what's right for you, and you know when the time is right for you to make a change, like,
Yeah.
such as that.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
too, it's like the emotion associated with you doing the thing is very indicative. Like, because I smoked weed every day for like many years, and then just
Yeah.
recently I've been smoking less. But when I do smoke, I'm really excited about doing it, and it's a
Mhm.
really fun thing. Instead of like when I was smoking all the time, it was mainly because I was really sad and like I didn't
Right.
want to feel that. So
Yeah.
if you're following the excitement and this is something that is enjoyable and isn't an escape,
Mhm.
then it's a totally different motivation and the experience is totally different too. So it's like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, whatever
It is. Yeah.
whatever
I
works.
get so high that I can't get high, sometimes. And so,
Yeah.
and I feel that, and that is a depressing stage. And whenever that happens, that's when I have to back off. That's when I have to just give
Yeah.
myself some time and come back to it and feel the magic, from a fresher perspective. By time, I mean like 8 hours or more. When I
Yeah.
was younger, I went for like a whole year without smoking it. And the first time, like, I was just like, oh my gosh, like, how did I ever even like this stuff? Like, it made me so paranoid.
Oh
But
yeah.
that didn't last long. I was right back to it again. But now that I built up a tolerance, of course, smoking as much as you did for so long, like, you do build up a tolerance, and it's just become like a balance for me. It's like,
Yeah, it's just
people who take
balance.
these antidepressants and it takes them a few weeks to kick in, and then like they're good as long as they maintain a certain dosage. And my dosage has never changed. I've consistently always been like 1 ounce for every 2 weeks. Like,
Hmm.
that's just my personal thing. And so when I grow it, I try to make sure I just get enough, for myself to have 1 ounce every 2 weeks, and I'm good.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
there are
it
people
is
out there
just
who
about
just, like, they could
balance.
go through like Snoop Dogg, for God's sake. That man,
Yeah,
he's a walk-in joint.
yeah,
He just,
he's puffing.
yeah,
Um,
I can't imagine smoking that much.
yeah, that'd be a lot.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, having been through all of these experiences that you went through as a kid and as an adult, and like, what is it like being a father now? What was it like becoming a father and being a father now? And how has your parenting been affected by, what you know from your childhood experiences?
That's a very good question. That's a good, like, double question. One, being a father is the greatest gift of my life. Like, I will honestly tell you that, like, I think I wanted children more than anything in the world, and I've always felt like I should be a dad. For some reason, I don't know why, but I just have always felt like I was supposed to be a father. Getting our children as foster infants was amazing because they bonded with us from such an early age and infancy that they never missed their biological mother or, like, family. Like, they didn't have the same separation trauma that older children may have when they're
Yeah.
taken apart, taken from their families. Of course, there's always trauma through adoption, and that's what the adoptee talk was quick to remind me, when I posted videos about that. The challenges of adoption can be difficult depending on how much trauma the child comes to you with, and there are degrees of trauma. But every child who's separated from their birth mother has experienced trauma, and
Mhm.
I know this for a fact because I saw the way that my grandchildren have bonded with their mom, and how throughout pregnancy and everything that the bond was developing in the womb. So, like, even at birth, when a child is taken away from their birth mother, they can't possibly, process that separation, and so they may go through life feeling and having issues with separation anxiety. So I'm well aware of that. But that's no different than most other adoptive parent challenges. Being two gay dads, or two, I'm actually bi and my husband is gay, but yeah, being two men raising children together has presented some challenges for our family. There was one incident which I recently told a story about, in which a police officer who lived on our street had asked if our son Anthony could go play at his house when he was about almost 2.5, 3 years old. And we said sure, because we could see him. We were at the end of a cul-de-sac, and this police officer basically entrapped us. He sent Anthony back home walking by himself at that age. Of course, we could see that he was on the grass and he was safe. Like, we tried to give our children freedom and independence, and it's a cul-de-sac. There's no traffic, so there was never any danger. But the officer should have brought our child back home to us, and we thought that was suspicious. But then, as soon as Anthony got back home, a police officer showed up, another cop, one in the cruiser, accusing us of basically neglecting our children, saying that we weren't watching Anthony and that he was 3 blocks away. And I'm like, well, what was he shopping at Walmart? Like he's 3 blocks away. We live at the end of a cul-de-sac. There's no blocks here, and he's been home all day. He just went up to the neighbor's house to hang out with that cop over there. Well, it turns out that it was the cop up the street who had called the cop who came to our house. He was trying to entrap us. He didn't want gay parents with kids in the neighborhood, apparently. And but the cop who showed up was his friend, and he ended up like reporting us to DCFS, and DCFS investigated, and they had the nerve to ask my 2.5-year-old son if either of his daddies touches him inappropriately. And it just infuriated me because like this is not the kind of stuff that would have happened to straight couples, with adopted children. First of all, most people in the neighborhood probably wouldn't care that the straight couple down the street has an adopted child. They wouldn't be, and even if they suspected there was any kind of neglect and a cop showed up, they wouldn't be questioning that child about whether mommy or daddy is, touching them inappropriately. Felt like the whole thing was just geared towards them looking at us as an experiment or, as some social guinea pigs for adoption, because it was in the 90s. There were not very many people adopting kids, gay people. And really less than 1% of all gay people at that time even wanted to adopt, according to surveys. I'm not sure if that's changed. Yeah, there were some challenges, and sending the boys to school. Initially, like I didn't even tell anybody that I was their dad. Like they knew, and it was like kind of keeping it in the family thing, because I didn't want them to have that stigma. And so for the most part, they went to school. I didn't show up. I wasn't there for teacher meetings, and I just didn't get involved. My husband took care of all those things, but they grew up to be very normal. They graduated from high school. My son Anthony will tell you he has experienced some bullying in school because of his two dads, but he didn't tell us that at the time, and it breaks my heart because like he made a video after I went on TikTok, and he stitched a video that I did talking about our experience adopting as a gay couple. And he was telling people that he loves us very much, that he, felt like he didn't have a childhood that was much different from most other children. In fact, he was very privileged because we took a lot of vacations. We went to Poland to see my husband's home country. We went to Hawaii, went to Yellowstone, Arizona, Niagara Falls, Disney World every year. But the abuse that I experienced as a child affected my parenting in the way that I was very overprotective of these kids. I watched them like a hawk. There was never a time when my children were allowed to go do an overnighter with a friend. There was no babysitter. When we took these vacations, we took them with us every time. I wouldn't dream of going on a vacation without my children. If I had family or friends over at my house, even like they were kept away, from my children. There was a distance, and I didn't trust anybody. I just didn't trust anybody. And so my kids maybe were more sheltered on like the helicopter dad or whatever. And so they probably didn't like that very much. And I'm sure that had an effect on them, but they've never complained or said, not as adults. As children, it was always, why can't I go to summer camp? Well,
Yeah,
because there's molesters at summer camp, honey. I go to church.
right.
Yes, but more molesters at the church.
They're everywhere.
So tell your friend Josh no, and his mama too. They
Yeah.
always see
No,
somebody trying to indoctrinate my child.
it's tough. I mean, I feel the same way. Like whenever I do have kids, I'm definitely not going to let them have sleepovers. Like there's no way.
Yeah,
And I think that it's just something that you know, as a kid, of course, there will be frustration, and then as you get older and like have a deeper understanding of like what, like no matter how much I tell you the dangers and all of the things that can go on, and even if you would say, like I was thinking about this, how it's like you can't prevent your kid from getting drugged at a sleepover. There's too much risk. And you can stay as late as you want. I'll come pick you up, drop you off at 7 a.m., but there's no way you're going to sleep there. And
Right.
I think that it's just, as like you were saying, that, as adults now, it's very different. But I think that the annoyance that your kids may have for you at the time is well worth the things that you're
Right.
probably avoiding.
Yeah.
Um,
We
but
kept them safe.
yeah,
And
that's awesome.
that's what matters. Yeah.
And I know you touched on this briefly earlier, but I also just wanted to ask you about what it was like when your son turned 15 and you had that moment of realization.
Yeah. My son Patrick will kill me for this. When he was 16 years old, well, actually, when he was 15, when my son Patrick turned 15, he's our youngest son. Um, he he met a girl, and went over to this girl's house, and she was adopted too. And we thought, oh, this is great. They're going to go to the movies or something. Him and her parents. The first time he's 15, he's like, I really want to go to their house, and everything. And I'm like, but I don't know their parents that well, so like you're going to have to be back this evening. Like, I don't want you staying out too late or anything. He was not over at their house for like more than an hour before that girl's dad was bringing him back home because he had been caught by his his girlfriend's dad in the basement. The little girl was pleasuring him, and so that was his first experience, and he was so innocent, and and he feels so much shame and so much guilt, mostly for getting caught. But even still, like, the fact that, he had to feel any kind of guilt at all is just wrong. I mean, they weren't doing anything that, other kids, that other kids don't do.
Mhm.
I think it's very common, for promiscuity, amongst young people, especially today, is probably even more prominent than it was back in, when I was younger. I'm guessing, just based on what I see on social media.
Yeah.
Kids today are shameless, but at this time, I felt like seeing his guilt in his eyes, a glint of guilt, and the glint of embarrassment. It was like it just hit home with me. I I felt like I was taken right back to that moment where the the first time I was molested, and then the 40-year-old man did the same thing to me. But I almost wished at this point that somebody had caught me. Like I wish that somebody had
Mm.
stopped it.
Yeah.
And another thing I carried with me for years was the guilt of not telling anybody, like not reporting him to the police, not fully conversing about this with my mom as I should have, and not with school counselors or anybody. I kept it inside, like, and later I would tell my friends about it, they're like, "Damn, bitch, you were a slut all the time." So you were born a slut. It's like that's the kind of friends I used to keep.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore. I find I'm much more selective about my friends today than I used to be.
Mhm.
But we put up with it. Like you said, we normalize it. We somehow feel that because we were 15 years old and we thought we were grown up, that this was a grown up decision, or when even at 12 or 13, that we were able to make these decisions, but we weren't. And the innocence in my children's eyes, especially my son Patrick, was like it was an epiphany for me,
Mhm.
because I really knew he was a child. He was just a baby. And not just because he was my baby, but every single one of his 15-year-old friends were babies to me. And one, made me feel really old, but two, made me feel much wiser, because I began to understand that this was not my fault, that
Mhm.
I was a child, I was manipulated, and that these people didn't have to do this to me. They didn't
Mhm.
have to. They didn't have to do it to anybody. They chose to do it, and I just happened to be, the victim. But I will not be a victim anymore. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm a survivor. I feel like after what I've been through, and as strong as I've become, to be able to talk about it, and in your case, to be able to do comedy, and incorporate that into your act, I think it does two incredible things. One, it's got to be healing for you, and I'm all for that. Healing
Yeah.
in any way that helps you, and like in comedy, and laughter is the best medicine always. But at the same time, you've processed it, you're letting it out, and you're helping other people. because the other people who've experienced this can say, look, if this guy is like healed enough to be able to joke about it, then maybe someday I can get there too. Maybe I don't have to
Yeah.
carry this guilt with me.
Thank you. Yeah. And right back at you. I mean, that's the thing is like I think that, this happens to so many people. And if there's anyone that we are able to, I mean, we are helping lots of people just by talking about it and being
Yeah.
open about
Hmm.
it and coming from a space of unconditional love. I mean, what a thing to feel. And
Yeah.
it's like that is not, you don't just because you were molested doesn't mean you don't have access to this space. This
Right.
dimension is available for everyone no matter what you've been through. And
Right. Just tap into it.
yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's awesome. What advice would you give to somebody who has been through something similar and is hoping to get to the point where you're at now?
Um, I can't say go out and get yourself some psilocybin because that's going to be like that. But in my case, it did. But I would say find your psilocybin, find what works for you. Like as far as because I feel like everybody instinctively knows ourselves well enough to know, and if you're with all the information that we have today that I didn't have 20 years ago, we can find what works for us. Like they're doing ketamine therapy, that is showing great promise right now, and I have heard nothing but good stories from people who have been able to access these treatments, and especially military PTSD cases are like really being helped by that. I know they're doing a lot of studies on psilocybin, and so I think my thing would be, first of all, don't give up hope. If you're going through this and you feel shame and you feel guilt, number one, do not give up hope, because if I can fight my way out of that, dilemma, I think anybody can. 10 years of living as a recluse, starving myself, not loving myself, finally I feel strong, and I found my own way, and it makes me feel even more strong and independent to know that I did that on my own, that I did my research and I found what would work for me. um, Therapy is awesome. Like I recommend to anybody who has access to therapy, who's able to talk about these things to somebody. If you can't talk about it to your family, if you're nowhere near going online and discussing it, which it takes a long time to get here. But if you want to talk about it, if you feel the need to talk about it, then you should talk about it, and you should talk about it with a therapist, because they're not going to share your story with anybody else. So I really do promote therapy. I did therapy for a while in the beginning. But for me, I think part of my self-loathing was that I wanted to just keep it inside. I stopped
Mhm.
seeing a therapist and I held it inside, and that's really how the 10 years of becoming a recluse started. I didn't even seek therapy. I didn't wasn't strong enough to tell a therapist my story at that point. So just love yourself, to understand that it's not your fault. That's the key. For me, the biggest healing epiphany was just realizing that it wasn't my fault, that I
Mm.
was a child, that children are not responsible for what adults do to us or what adults allow to happen to us, that
Yeah.
that is not our fault. Like if you see a 15-year-old child getting manipulated by an adult, it's not that child's fault. Yes, there are children who do horrible things. 15-year-old boys can go in and do horrible things that can be tried as an adult, but we're different. We were, um, we didn't commit a crime. We had a crime committed against us, and that adult who did it should have known better, and they did know better, and they did it anyway. And the key is to love yourself and to not care what other people think. Not that adult who molested you, not that parent who might have neglected you. Their opinion should not have any validity. Your only your the opinions, and believe when people tell you that they love you. If people are sincere, like, and they, like my husband tells me he loves me, I believe it, because I trust him. But you can't just believe everybody who says they love you, if unless you trust them, and people have to earn your trust. So I think that that's just things that we all have to work on within ourselves, is learning how to trust people, learning who we can trust and who we can't, and understanding that it's not our fault and forgiving ourselves for things that we've done to ourselves, whether it be drug abuse or promiscuity, or in my case, turning tricks, um, thinking that I was only worth what people would pay me to be with them. Like, I have to forgive myself, and I do. I forgive myself for that, and I think that's what helps me forgive my mom for what she did and what she allowed. And but these epiphanies came to me, like I said, through a different kind of therapy that I found for myself. But I think there's something out there for everybody. I think there really is. I've met people who can't smoke weed. Like, it makes them so super paranoid, and it does the opposite of what they would hope. And my suggestion to people is just, never do anything twice if it's bad the first time.
Mm,
If you have a bad experience with anything, then don't repeat it. But yeah, just be strong, get counseling if you need it. But sometimes whether you feel like you need it or not, counseling is just a good idea.
yeah.
It's such a good idea.
I love what you said. Yeah, there is something out there that will work for everyone, and keep looking. And,
Hmm.
sometimes it's multiple things. Like for me, I started doing stand up and I thought, this is it. I figured out this is the way that I'm going to heal from this. And then only
Yeah.
like 4.5, 5 years later did I go back to therapy and start realizing, like, oh, that was a big part of it. And then there's also all of this other stuff too. So sometimes it's not a one-stop shop. Sometimes it is, but they're just keep exploring and keep doing what works. And,
Yeah.
you can get to that point where, you feel free from what's happened and free to
Mhm.
go through life and experience everything, you know.
Yeah, comedy is very freeing. I admire people who can do comedy. I've never felt like I really had. I could tell a good one liner here and there, but to like
Yeah.
do a whole stand up, I just don't think I have it in me. And so, because you have to be able to maintain, like, the energy, that you're putting out there. And I just love that. I think that is such a gift and such a talent to be able to make people laugh like that. You are blessed. You are really blessed, and I
Thank you.
hope that I wish you all the success in the world with that, because I have nothing but envy for anyone who's capable of like standing up in front of a group of people and just getting them to laugh their asses off like that. I mean, that's a gift. You are giving everybody a gift, like, and I just think that's wonderful. You've turned something really bad into something amazing and fun, and it's such a good distraction from all the chaos in the world. And I just appreciate that. As an entertainer, you've chosen a route that um, most people can only dream of. But it takes talent, and it takes dedication and skill, and I'm sure a lot of other things that I don't have.
well,
Discipline,
well,
um, you
thank you
know
so much. But
and
and I
creativity. Like, a lot of creativity goes into what you do, and I think that's awesome. I really appreciate that you're doing that. Really
Thank
do.
you, Chaz. Yeah, I mean, and just to also say that even though you might not be standing up in front of a group of people doing stand up, but you are speaking to millions of people about
Yeah,
your experiences and what you're
that
how you
blows my
are.
mind.
So,
Yeah, that really blows my mind.
yeah, just also,
Yeah.
you are doing very similar things, and it's really important and essential. And I think that the best thing that you can do when you heal is to help other people, and to when you feel this unconditional love, to share it with the world, not, and like you said, not coming from a compelling place, but just to operate in your own space of unconditional love, and to show yourself to the world, and know that that rub off is more powerful than any sort of attempted conversion. You get to allow people to see you, which is
Right.
something that when we go through the experiences that we've gone through is scary.
Yeah.
We don't want to be watched, and just putting yourself out there for everyone to see, and the way that you do it is it's so unique, and so like it makes you want to share your own stuff, and that is like it's so powerful. And
Thanks.
I'm really glad that you're doing what you're doing, and I'm so
Thank
grateful to
you.
have had you on here today. It was
I
such a
really appreciate
pleasure.
it. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah.
You are inspiring me. Like I want to be funnier,
Well, if
but
you
I
ever
also,
feel like doing some stand up, let me know and
I could.
we
I'm
can
gonna have
figure
to,
out.
learn a lot of things from you because, like, I would love to expand in my genre a little bit. Like my stories could be a little funnier, for sure. Like I could, like I put a little bit
Yeah.
of comic relief in there, a little bit here and there. But we do the same thing, just in different ways. I think,
Yeah.
I'm a storyteller, and you are a comedian. But our message is the same, which is, it's okay. You can heal, and it's not your fault, and that you should love yourself, and that you're not alone. And I think that the love that we receive is very similar from our audiences. I think that we're so blessed. And I don't know about you, but that love heals me. Those comments heal me in ways that I never thought I even needed. Like I thought maybe I was done healing. I'm not.
Yeah.
Because every time somebody says something, and it warms my heart, it makes me stronger. They're strengthening us with their love, I think,
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have a platform. I know you are too,
Mhm.
and I'm grateful that you do, because now, as a person who's out here speaking about sexual abuse of children, I feel less alone knowing that there's somebody as powerful as you out there doing the same in your own way. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah. The feeling is powerfully mutual. It is so awesome. And Chaz, where can people find you? What is your TikTok username?
It is at Chaz Onator, which is ChazOnator. And there's like a few other accounts imitating me right now, but you'll know it's me because there's like over 500 videos on my page. And right now I'm at like 539,000 followers
Amazing.
as of today. Yeah, and growing, hopefully.
Inevitably.
But,
Yes. That's
yeah,
so
so
cool.
like that's the only way to know. Like all my imitators have like 1,000 or less, and
Mhm.
but it's crazy that they have so many imitators. I want the blue check mark, but they won't let me have it. I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
who do I got to screw to get a blue check mark around here?
Yeah, the final sexual exchange. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. We just need to
I'm right.
be
I'll try to trick.
yeah, nine
Right,
nine
that's what it
dollars an hour
takes.
or a blue check mark. Either way. Yeah. Well, Chaz, thank you
Okay.
so much for doing this,
Well, thank
and
you very
I look
much.
forward
I
to
enjoyed it
speaking
very
to you
much.
again soon. All right,
All
man.
right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.
Dude,
Let me know when you post this, because I can't wait to see it and share it.
yes. I'll text you. I'll let you know. Feel free to post anything you want wherever you want to, and no pressure if you don't want to. It's completely fine. So,
Well, thanks. No,
and
I would love to. I mean, I could share clips if you want me to.
of course, yeah, I'll
Just
do.
like do little clips and say, my first time on a podcast, because it is.
This is your first time on a
It
podcast?
is.
Oh
Yeah, I've
my
had a few
God.
people offer me, but I actually don't even like going live. Like I'm really
Yeah.
weird about that.
Yeah. I feel that.
I get stage fright. Yeah.
Yeah.
Recording
Yeah.
my content is one thing, but like actually going live is another. But
It's a
you have
totally
definitely
different
melted the
animal.
ice, and like you made me feel so comfortable. You're an excellent host. You ask really good questions, and
Thank
you
you.
give people the time to answer, which is great.
Oh, it's been so cool having you on here. I would never have known that this was your first time doing a podcast. This
Well,
is
thank
you.
you.
I think if you ever feel like it, you should start one. I also think you should write a book. Have
Yeah,
you
I
written a
am.
book?
I am writing it right now.
Excellent.
It's just, it has always been difficult because of it's very emotional, and like
Yeah.
writing it and re-editing it and going over it. And, it seems harder than making videos about it, because I have
Yeah.
to I'm looking to dig up more details and try, and, innuendo and nuance. And, it could be really hard for me to write. So I try to get to it, but I'm just doing like a little bit at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure
If you,
that you'll
yeah,
finish it in
I've got
perfect
loads of
timing.
stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
People are like,
Yeah.
Netflix series. I'm like, I haven't even written the book
Well,
yet.
I could
Not like that's going to
easily
happen,
see
but
that. Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
look forward to reading it or watching whenever it comes
Well,
out,
thank
and
you.
just let me know, and I can add it back into the description of the video so people can find it when it
That's
does come out.
awesome.
And yeah, dude, can't thank you enough. Amazing job.
My
So
pleasure.
cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We'll talk
Have a
again
wonderful
soon.
day.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
too. See you later,
You take
Chaz.
care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.